a team headed by the Agriculture Commissioner that will come during the what's called the Somos weekend, which brings New York legislators down to Puerto Rico. And we want to work with the Puerto Rican agricultural community to see how we can help them get up and running and how we can be more aggressive about buying products from Puerto Rico to help that community and that sector of the economy. Third, we have a joint tourism effort with Puerto Rico, which we started several years before. It predated the hurricane. And we'll be working with the governor's office to see if we can increase that joint tourism promotion, where we work with airlines and tourist agencies to develop the tourism between New York and Puerto Rico. We want people coming to Puerto Rico. We want to stimulate that part of the economy. And many people had heard about the hurricane and they weren't sure about the condition of Puerto Rico. We want them to know that Puerto Rico is not just a great place to live, it's also a great place to visit. And New York is beautiful too. But people from New York might want to vacation out of New York, and if they do, we want them to think about Puerto Rico, and we want to increase those joint efforts. I'd also like to address the federal government's response once more. We spent many months, this has now been 10 months, believe it or not, and we spent many months criticizing the federal government for an inappropriate response. And the federal government said for many months, no, we're doing everything we can do, it's going great, it's going great. The president applauded FEMA, applauded the recovery effort. We now know that was all baloney. As we would actually say something else in New York. We'd actually say something else in New York, but leave it at baloney for now. That was not true. What the President of the United States said was not true. And I'm not saying that as an elected official. This is not a political debate. The federal government put out a report that said the federal response was ineffective, anemic, FEMA was not prepared, they did not have an appropriate response for Puerto Rico. That is the federal government controlled by President Trump. That is the same federal government and the same president who for months said the response to Puerto Rico was laudatory. The federal report was not by the Congress, it was not by the Democrats, it was by the president's agency. And it refuted everything the president said. So the president said for many months, this has been a great response. Federal government comes out with a report. The federal report says it was not a great response. It was a poor response. FEMA wasn't ready. They were shorthanded. They weren't prepared. And the rebuilding effort has not been what it should have been. That is now documented. That is not a political dispute, even in this heated political climate. That is a fact. Now, the President of the United States should respond to that fact. Mr. President, you were wrong. You were wrong for months. Everything you said turned out not to be true. Your own federal government says the response was inadequate. What are you going to do? I suggested, number one, he starts with an apology to the people of Puerto Rico. Why? Because he was wrong. Because what he said was not true. And when you say something that is not true, and you then find out the facts, and you're the President of the United States, it's incumbent on you to say, I was wrong. And I apologize. because what I said was wrong, and even more because my federal government did not do the right thing in helping the people of Puerto Rico. That's step one. Step two, the president should say, well, now that I understand the response was not adequate, I'm going to make it right. How do you make it right? Puerto Rico asked for $94 billion in the recovery plan. All they have gotten is a $5 billion loan. That is disgraceful. That is disgraceful. So now, Mr. President, that you know you were not helpful to the people of Puerto Rico, fund the recovery effort that they need to rebuild. That is the least you can do. And third, Mr. President, I'm going to send him a letter. I'm going to invite him to come back to Puerto Rico. Come back to Puerto Rico. The island that he disrespected. The island that his agencies failed to serve. Come back to Puerto Rico. Look for yourself at the damage. Look at the number of homes that still need help. Look at the devastation to the economy of Puerto Rico. Understand what your tax reform bill did to Puerto Rico and how the tax reform bill actually hurt the economy at a time when the island needed it most, decimating the pharmaceutical industry, which was the mainstay of one of the largest sectors of the Puerto Rican economy. Come and look at the damage that was exacerbated by your lack of federal response. I will even come with you, Mr. President. Remember that you came from New York originally, Mr. President, and remember how important the Puerto Rican connection is as a New Yorker. Come back to Puerto Rico. Apologize for the mistake. Say that you will make it right, provide funding for the reconstruction effort, and provide help for the struggling economy. Puerto Rico never needed paper towels, Mr. President. They needed funding assistance to rebuild the economy. People needed roofs on their homes. They needed clean water. They didn't need paper towels. Come back and fix the wrong. Come back and right the wrong. That is now indisputable because your own federal agency said it. Puerto Rico suffered a disaster at the same time that Florida and Texas had a disaster. There is no difference between Texas, Florida, and Puerto Rico. They are all home to American citizens. And they all deserved the full response of their federal government. Puerto Rico did not get it. Florida did. Texas did. Puerto Rico did not get it. Puerto Rico was neglected, abandoned, and disrespected by this administration. And they did not deserve it. My last point is, I've been to Puerto Rico many times. As I mentioned, I was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Clinton, and I did a lot of work in public housing, and I've been to Puerto Rico many times during the Clinton administration. I also did emergency assistance in Puerto Rico during that time. That was the time of Hurricane Georges, and I was here for the reconstruction effort at that time with Governor Rosselló I. There was a Governor Mario Cuomo I too, so I can say that. Every time I come to the island, I am impressed. And on this visit, what really has struck me is in the middle of all the pain and all the neglect and all the disrespect, if there was a people who had a right to be angry, if there was a people who had a right to complain, it is the Puerto Rican people. They have a total right to say, I am so angry, I am so annoyed at what happened to us. That is not the Puerto Rican way. Every place we went, we were met with smiles, optimism, gratitude, thanks. The character and the spirit of the Puerto Rican people is beautiful and resilient and strong and contagious. And it is that optimism and that charitable, positive instinct that makes this island so special. Yes, it's beautiful, and yes, Mother Nature blessed it, but it's the people that are the most special. And that's the greatest asset of Puerto Rico. And every time I come, I leave inspired. With that, I will turn it over to Borough President Ruben Diaz of El Bronx.
Gracias, Gobernador. Buenas tardes a todos. Governor, I just want to put an addendum to some of your suggestions that you've given this president about how he should handle Puerto Rico. I think one of the things that you should add, or we should all add, is that what he should do is study you. You exemplify and embody a true profile in leadership that unfortunately is lacking in this president. And we appreciate everything that you're doing. We also share your sentiments and your frustrations as how this federal government has failed and put out a report of their very own failure. But what you have been able to accomplish here with all of the men and women of labor and unions and the leadership of the healthcare industry. We have George Gresham here, we have Dennis Rivera here, and so many others. It's pretty impressive. What I've seen over the last 2 days is nothing short of miraculous and impressive in that coordination, which is not easy. To have so many individuals come together, band together, sacrifice their summers, volunteer, be away from their families, away from their comfort of their homes, and yet have that enthusiasm and that energy and that coordination that is providing real results. And granted, we wish that it could happen at a macro level. I wish there were other governors in the United States that can share their resources and their efforts so that we can amplify these services. But to have you say that you're going to increase the amount of students, that's fascinating. That's wonderful. Because what we also saw is not only are they getting provided with the best civic-minded lesson or the civic lesson that they can have, it's fulfilling for them, but at the same time, we also know that this is more than just about brick and mortar. Like Doña Nelly said today when we was in Orocovis, she says that she's been full of anxiety, that she's been crying for 10 months. And to see all of these individuals now fixing the roof of her house and the presence there, it has a true positive psychological effect on her and her neighbors and hopefully to the rest of the people of the island of Puerto Rico. One thing I want folks to understand is that Andrew Cuomo has not been to Puerto Rico just post-Hurricane Maria. We've been here before. We were here because prior to that hurricane and that storm, we all knew that Puerto Rico was and still continues to be an economic storm. We tried to address that. And you came here. I know that you spoke to Marcos, and Marcos will speak a little bit about this. And you opened up an office headed by your very capable Betty Enrique and your staff. And with that, there have been ongoing conversations. So when you speak of working with the agricultural community here, we've already been doing that with your staff, with the Bronx Overall Economic Development Corporation, Marlene Cintron, who's been with us on this mission. She's out on location. I'm happy to report that Fresh Direct, which is an online grocer, is negotiating and purchasing lettuce and different vegetables and fruits already. In the Hunts Point Produce Market, there are fruits that are being purchased by many folks who are growing them here in Puerto Rico. Gerard Cash and Carry has been purchasing fruits. We in negotiations with Jetro in the Hunts Point section of the Bronx. And we even have a reverse commute. We have Bronx hot sauce that is making their way from the Bronx to Puerto Rico. So, shameless plug for the Bronx hot sauce. Brevemente le quiero dar las gracias a nuestro gobernador. Saludos del condado del Bronx. Yo represento el condado con la población más grande de puertorriqueños allá en la ciudad de Nueva York. Le queremos dar las gracias porque lo que hemos visto en los últimos días es algo impresionante, de ver de la coordinación entre las uniones, los estudiantes, la comunidad aquí, la energía, el entusiasmo. Es algo que debemos de seguir hacia adelante con el liderazgo de nuestro gobernador. Sabemos que Puerto Rico siempre va a tener una pareja, siempre va a tener ese compromiso del estado de Nueva York. Ojalá y que otros gobernadores a nivel de los Estados Unidos puedan aprender y puedan encontrar en su corazón y enseñar el mismo liderazgo. Pero como presidente del condado del Bronx, como neoyorquino, como hijo de un vaquero de Bayamón y mami de Ponce, me siento sumamente orgulloso de lo que hemos visto, sumamente orgulloso y honrado de estar aquí en esta misión con nuestro gobernador. Y espero reportarle a aquellas personas en el Bronx y en Nueva York de que sí, ahora tenemos este vehículo de aquellas personas que quieran asistir, que quieren ser voluntarios, puedan venir aquí y ser parte de esta iniciativa. And so with that, Governor, I just want to say, I want to thank your staff. I want to thank your team, many who are not in this room today, because it is not easy what they're doing. And what has been established here is now a long-term vehicle so that New Yorkers who want to volunteer, New Yorkers who want to do something to help out, whether they're Puerto Rican or not, now there's that vehicle in place here, and I can't wait to go back and to report to them how to take those steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want you to know I'm going to make my personal effort to improve the economy of Puerto Rico. I saw a 1957 Chevy along the way. It is a beauty. It is under restoration. The owner is not ready to sell, but I think if I get him alone without the cameras, I can talk to him about it. The car needs a little work. 1957 Chevy is a special car, special year. A lot of good things happened in 1957. I was born in 1957. Car needs a little work on the top, so do I. A little work on the top. But it's a special one. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to give Dennis Rivera a special assignment to go back and try to coerce the owner into selling that 1957 Chevy. I haven't given up. It's a beauty. With that, our great public advocate from New York City, she's been a great champion for Puerto Rico and for people who are down and out all her public service career. Tish James.
Thank you, Mr. Governor. So good morning, everyone. As we flew into Puerto Rico, what we all noticed was the blue tarps on the roofs. They dotted the landscape of Puerto Rico. And for me, that underscores the fact that Puerto Rico is still in great need. And so it's an honor and a privilege to be here and to share these last few days with the Cuomo team and all of those who have given up their time. It's also an honor and a privilege to be a proud graduate of CUNY because the students from CUNY and SUNY who have given up their time, those who have thought about others before they have thought about their convenience, they are truly champions. And it really is the greatest teaching moment that they could ever achieve in a classroom. And that is really important. And what I also noticed is as we visited the municipalities and towns, the humility, the graciousness of all of the residents who welcomed us into their homes. And despite all the challenges that they face, they did it with a smile, they did it with a sense of decency and a sense of gratitude. And for that, that will forever remain in my heart. I think it's really critically important that we talk about policy. And there were two policy recommendations that, for me, came out of this trip. And that is, one, the deeds and the title to the property, which a lot of residents in Puerto Rico cannot find. At no point in time did they ever have access to deeds and to titles. In order to get FEMA resources, individuals need deeds and titles. And so I am urging FEMA to relax the regulations so that individuals can get financial assistance from FEMA. Two, resources need to go to municipalities. And it's really critically important that we get resources to individuals who need it most. It's my understanding that most individuals who are seeking to fix their homes cannot get the resources from FEMA. We need to get money on the ground, and we need to do it as quick as possible. And as the governor mentioned, FEMA obviously is, for me, it doesn't represent federal, it represents a failing agency. So, I think we should take heed from the leadership from Governor Cuomo. He has been on the ground. He has visited Puerto Rico at least 5 times, and he has truly been a champion, and we really can take some advice and counsel from the great state of New York and from all of those New Yorkers who gave up their time and gave resources to Puerto Rico. I'm not Puerto Rico, but today I am Puerto Rican because the spirit of Puerto Rico is in my heart and in my soul. And as they say, we will never forget. We will never forget what we witnessed here. We will never forget that this island still is in need of assistance and that they too are citizens. It's really critically important that we understand that. And that they not be treated differently and that they not be treated like second-class citizens. And I want to thank Governor Cuomo because although Puerto Rico's been out of the headlines, he continues to shine a spotlight on the needs of the residents of Puerto Rico. And so we must never forget, and we must make sure that this never happens again to our citizens of these United States. And so I'm urging that the federal government step up, and if they can't step up, move out of the way. And let individuals who can provide leadership and guidance and individuals who know this island the best, give them the resources. Because clearly the federal government, unfortunately, has shown nothing but ineptitude. And at this point in time, what individuals in Puerto Rico need is direct and immediate action, and they need it now. Pass Congressmember Espaillat's bill. FEMA, get out of the way. Relax the restrictions on deed and title, and get resources to individuals on the ground. Again, if the President of the United States is upset at this message, my name is Tish. You can tweet it in just 4 characters, TISH, and you need to do better. And it's really a disappointment and an embarrassment because it's inconsistent with our values and who we are as Americans. We can do better than this. We should have learned from Katrina. And this was at least several times worse in terms of fatalities. And this should never, ever, ever happen to American citizens again. And this is something that we should never, ever forget. Thank you, Governor.
Well said, well said. And now we turn to Assemblyman Marcos Crespo, who, as I mentioned before, he's been a leader back in New York to organize this effort and to bring all the pieces together. He'll be having a conference of the New York State legislators, and he's bringing them down to Puerto Rico. As Tish said, we want to make sure that the nation doesn't forget about Puerto Rico. It's been 10 months, and there's a constant news cycle, and the news is always changing, and Puerto Rico's not in the news today, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be, and that doesn't mean the pain doesn't go on. Marcos Crespo.
Thank you, Governor. For those of you who have not heard me say this before, I was born here in Puerto Rico, born in Guayama, raised in Arroyo, called the Bronx home, and I'm blessed to be an elected leader at a time like this, working with a governor like Andrew Cuomo, who, as the borough president mentioned, has been an example of what leadership is about and what government responsibility is about. And I agree with the governor in calling out the president to come back, to do better, to apologize, to fix his wrongs. I agree with our public advocate, Tish James, that FEMA needs to open up opportunities for families who desperately need the resources they deserve in order to rebuild. And I agree with the sentiment overall that the federal government owes it to Puerto Rico to do better. I would make a different call. My call is to every Puerto Rican who lives in the 50 states, every Puerto Rican or Latino who identifies with our language and our culture, everyone who has ever visited Puerto Rico and fallen in love with this enchanted island, and everybody who understands that American democracy and American might, and that the responsibility of a government is to first and foremost protect its people. And as American citizens, Puerto Rico has not been protected nor supported. My call is to every one of those American voters to mobilize and to make their voices heard in the upcoming election cycle. And the fact of the matter is this: we have to make sure that Congress responds to Puerto Rico and holds this president accountable. I don't trust that the president had misinformation. I believe he simply did not care about Puerto Rico and its people because he couldn't relate to the language, he couldn't relate to who we are, and we look too much like the immigrants that he's fighting against as opposed to the neo-Nazis that he's defending. The fact of the matter is that until we as a community start to mobilize and hold them accountable and elect congressional officials who will stand up for Puerto Rico, the governor, as was said, has been here before Maria. Matter of fact, when we had the march for health care, it was the governor standing with other leaders here in Puerto Rico in the healthcare sector and the union members and others to demand that Puerto Rico get healthcare parity. That fight continues. When we talk about green infrastructure, the federal government invests heavily, and this administration has tried to pull back on that, but those investments can't forget places like Puerto Rico and the potential for resiliency. How do we protect against the next storm? The fact is that when Puerto Rico needed more out of the federal government, it's not just been the response to Maria. It has been a consistent failure to recognize the 4 million, 3.5 million American citizens who call Puerto Rico home. And so we need to do something about it. And when people who went back home were asking, well, what are you guys doing out there? Well, let me tell you what I think we're doing here. Number one, we're here on behalf of those thousands upon thousands of New Yorkers who felt it important to respond to Puerto Rico's needs, who came to the many collection drives that the governor helped to sponsor to bring a can of food or a bag of rice or clothing for families or anything that they can spare. They want us to be here to respond to those that are in need that were neglected by the federal government. We are here because we are fighting for innovation and opportunity in Puerto Rico well before the storm hit. When the governor talks about his agricultural team, that isn't a new effort. That started when he opened the office in New York office in Puerto Rico, working with businesses. And this work that the Caribbean Produce Exchange has been able to do. If you are a New York farmer who sells apples, you should know that the Caribbean Exchange, the Caribbean Produce Exchange, has been buying New York apples, no longer from other states, to help our farmers as well, our growers. And vice versa, we are now going to make sure that we continue to open markets for Puerto Rican growers to sell in New York and in other places. The fact is that this is about doing what America stands for. And many people have been rallying for immigrant rights, and I support that too. Papi was an undocumented immigrant from Peru. But Mommy was a Puerto Rican woman who had children too young to finish school, who dedicated herself to helping us connect to our culture and heritage, who made sure that we lived here and learned our language. And it is in Mommy's honor, who still calls Puerto Rico home. Mommy lives in Arroyo, still works in town. It is on behalf of all of them and all those New Yorkers who want to see Puerto Rico recover that we are here. To say that we won't forget, and while others move on to the next topic, we will continue to come back. Because so long as there are families like the ones we visited in these towns, in Toabaja, in Orocovi, in La Playita, in todos estos lugares, and so long as there's somebody out there that has been abandoned by FEMA, that has been abandoned by President Trump, that has been abandoned by Congress, if we can do our part, if labor continues to bring its experts, if those CUNY students continue to come out, if all these not-for-profits and the governor's leadership and his team bringing everybody together, then we can make the difference that others should have, and we will be that strength and that support for Puerto Rico. En español rapidito, pocos líderes han hecho lo que este gobernador ha hecho por Puerto Rico. y pocos líderes han respondido de una manera consistente y donde se hace no se dice lo que se va a hacer, sino se logra resultados. Movilizar a las uniones laborales, movilizar a las organizaciones sin fines de lucro, los 500 estudiantes y más que vienen del sistema de la ciudad y del el sistema universitario del Estado, la movilización de oficiales electos y de ayuda. Esto ha sido un ejemplo en liderato y en gobierno responsable, algo que no tenemos del gobierno federal. Y lo que le exhortamos no solamente es traer atención a esta necesidad y hacer nuestro granito de arena para seguir ayudando, pero sobre todo trabajar con las industrias en Puerto Rico, como los agricultores, los agrónomos que están ahora comprando productos de Nueva York y también vendiendo su producto en Nueva York para crecer la economía. Vamos a seguir trabajando con ellos, pero sobre todo vamos a mandar un mensaje a la nación de que en estas elecciones que se asesinan, donde el Congreso de los Estados Unidos esté en juego, los latinos, los puertorriqueños, todos tenemos un mandato, que a través de nuestro voto hagamos la diferencia y no seguir apoyando personas que le van a dar la espalda, no importa el partido, tienen que conocer y tienen que tener un compromiso para el futuro de Puerto Rico. De lo contrario, ese voto tiene que contar. Y nos tenemos que hacer oír, pues si no, vamos a seguir en esta lucha. Yo no creo que este presidente va a cambiar su forma racista de ser, pero yo creo que el Congreso lo podemos ganar a favor de aquellos que van a luchar por la salud de Puerto Rico, la economía de Puerto Rico, la reconstrucción de Puerto Rico y el futuro. Y yo sé que en el gobernador Cuomo tenemos un líder que va a seguir llamando por ese cambio. Así que, thank you, Governor. Thank you for what you've done on behalf of my family, my community of Puerto Rican residents in the Bronx, and every New Yorker who knows that America deserves better. When Superstorm Sandy hit us, Puerto Rico was there with bodies, with resources, with support. And when Puerto Rico was hit hard, you responded like no one else. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Marcos. Thank you for your leadership. Last point, sometimes politics makes everything complicated. You have politics on the island, we have politics in the United States, everything is loud, everything is partisan. But sometimes it's very simple. We took the students who were down here to dinner last night. And these are young people who you would think had all sorts of plans for their summer vacation, and they were going to be youthful plans. And these are young people who decided to come down to Puerto Rico and spend their time cleaning out mud and swinging a sledgehammer. And I asked them, well, why did you decide to do this? Almost to the one, they said, well, it's simple. The people of Puerto Rico needed help. The people of Puerto Rico needed help. And I wanted to help. And it was our obligation to help. That's it. You don't need to know more than that. President Trump, government, the fundamental role of government, to help. That's what government is. President Trump hasn't helped. He should. President Trump should show the same leadership that the students who are down here shoveling mud show every day. Questions for myself or my colleagues?
The students we saw yesterday seemed very kind of proud and involved in the work they were doing. I'm curious if there was any plan. I understand the program ends in August, either extended or make it permanent for crediting. Presumably, you will be elsewhere, if not even necessarily here.
It is the first time we've ever done anything like that. It was a very novel concept when we posed it, and it was a big challenge for the bureaucracy. This was giving college kids credit to come down and do this type of work. Where would they stay? Could we get skilled labor? So it was a daunting task when we first proposed it. It has worked out extraordinarily well on every level. And we want to expand it. We want to expand it first for Puerto Rico. As I said, we have 500 students. We thought we were limited by capacity. We had 3,000 applicants. We now think we have more capacity. So we're looking to extend it for Puerto Rico. And I'm considering making it a permanent program for the state. There is something about community service. You want to have an education, you want to learn about the world, you want to learn about government, you want to learn about politics, you want to learn about civic, you want to learn about housing, whatever you want to learn about. There's nothing like doing it and getting on the ground and seeing what it's all about and meeting people. So I think it's great for the students. I know they are a great resource. So I'm thinking about making it a permanent program for SUNY and CUNY, but certainly increasing it for Puerto Rico. Our budget director is here, Rob Mejica. He's already working on expanding the program for Puerto Rico.
Take one more question. Yes, I have a question for Ms. James. You talked about asking FEMA to relax their restrictions. Because this is something that has been a problem.
Yeah.
And FEMA hasn't
Yeah.
relaxed the requisites for the aid.
So, first of all, FEMA is requiring that residents, in order to receive financial assistance to repair their homes, produce a deed or a title. And because property passes from one generation to the next, most individuals unfortunately cannot find their deed and/or title. So as a result of that, what we are asking is that FEMA relax those regulations. There is a bill pending in Congress. It's been sponsored by Congressmember Adriano Espaillat. That bill should be considered, or even in the absence of that bill, FEMA should do on its own. They should immediately relax those regulations, provide notices to individuals.
Have you been able to communicate with anybody in FEMA to ask this specifically?
We will be preparing a letter and joining with the governor and the other elected officials who are here, seeking, again, that those regulations be relaxed.
Anyone have a last question?
This is for the New York viewers. We would like to know if there's more pardons planned for immigrants that have committed minor crimes in the future.
Yes. President Trump has declared a war on new immigrants, and they're using every excuse that they can find to do just that. One of the excuses they look for are people who have committed crimes in the past. The only way to get those people out of harm's way is to pardon them. So yesterday we did 7 pardons. These are people who had committed crimes. They were nonviolent crimes. They had not committed any crimes for 10 years. They were leading productive lives. I pardoned those 7 people, which means they are no longer guilty of committing the crime. Not just that they were released, the crime itself is forgiven. It is pardoned. It is expunged. And that means the federal government can't use it as a basis for deportation. And we have done that before, and we're going to do that on a continuing basis, because this is just an all-out war in the United States on new immigrants, and we're going to do everything we can to fight it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.